we are back with another interview today. This time Pei is joining me, and we are here with Brian Bruce of Bookish, who is another one of our Stygian contributors. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brian. And let's start off, as we always do, with you just telling us a little about yourself, your creative works, and your YouTube channel.
Okay, well, my name is Brian Bruce. I'm 56 years old recently. I have two kids, married, retired history and other kind of social studies classes, teacher. I've probably been writing my whole life. I wrote plays in the third and the fourth grade that my teacher let us act out in class about various historical topics and things like that. And in college, I thought, oh, I'm going to be the next Ernest Hemingway. And so I adopted a lot of Ernest Hemingway type things, which fortunately I grew out of, even though he didn't. And then I found that, writing fiction for me was not necessarily the writing path for me. And so I primarily write nonfiction, publish a biography of an author named Thomas Boyd many years ago. I've been working on a military history, which is going to be published next year. And then just in my spare time, I write short stories and I've been writing more poetry lately. So I think that's it. My YouTube channel is pretty standard. I do like standard booktube stuff where on the weekends I kind of wrap up stuff. I do the occasional tag, even though fewer of those as I go along, book reviews. I share my political opinion from time to time on my channel too. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Very cool. So considering you've said that you didn't go the fiction path and you're mostly doing history, what inspired you to submit a piece to the Stygian Collection?
Well, I saw that you guys were doing it, and I liked what you said about how you wanted it to be open and to be this community-based project. And I thought that sounded great. I really enjoy the booktube community and getting to talk to people. And so it sounded really good. And the way you guys described it and set up sounded really unique and different and welcoming. And I just happened to have a story that I had worked on off and on for a really long period of time, which I thought sounded like it might fit what you guys were looking for in the collection. So I just kind of worked on that a little bit and then sent it to you.
Well, we're really glad you did, because it stands out stylistically quite a bit from the other stories. And also another thing that I think I had said in our outreach in our first videos when we were talking about this was that if we could bring forward people who were not doing, so like you're more on the booktube side of things, and we wanted to be able to bring in people who weren't just, author tube. So it's kind of cool to give you that extra highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like we love the piece, and it's called Watercolours, and I finally actually have the book here. I keep forgetting to have it with me when I'm talking about this. So it's a shorter piece, but it's very impactful, and I think that Pei can sort of get into your style and what you did with this piece a bit better than I can.
Okay.
Well, and you may have actually even answered part of this in introducing yourself, but I know it would have been oh geez, about maybe even 2 years ago now, or even over 2 years ago, in which I discovered your channel through an old series you did on Ernest Hemingway, and so maybe I just, since I knew that, I may have kind of inserted something in there that maybe wasn't supposed to. So I was just going to ask if there was any influence there or not.
I definitely think that when I do write fiction, I do write stories occasionally, but mostly just because I like to do it. I have a tendency to want to pare down the story and the writing to, just kind of what I think is essential, so that when there is something extra, it stands out more, that that the reader then can kind of, with the Hemingway iceberg theory, the reader can kind of infer things and pick up on things that are not necessarily things that I state. So like when I was writing this story, it started off much different scenario. I didn't mention this before, but my first YouTube channel was actually a fishing channel. And so in the beginning, the
Oh,
guy
wow.
in the
I remember
beginning,
you
the
saying
guy
that,
in
yeah.
the story is fishing. And I thought, good Lord, could you be more cliched as an old man than to write a story about fishing? So I took all the fishing stuff out, and then I just kind of made it this story about grief. Really, I think is what I would say it's primarily focused on, and loss, and kind of how you deal with that. Then this kind of twist thrown in, I think. But yeah, I was intentionally trying to, and I had the story, I pulled it out, I went through with a blue pen, and I marked out anything I thought wasn't necessary. And then I typed it up again, and then I went back and looked for places where there wasn't enough, I thought. And so I kind of did like that. There are probably 15 or 16 drafts of the story, not just in the time since you guys announced you're doing it, but like over the course of the story's life. So yeah, I think Hemingway definitely kind of, influenced the way I think about writing fiction, active verbs, not a lot of adverbs, just kind of really basic old school writing stuff because, well, kind of old. So
No, yeah, no, I was just, yeah, I just, I definitely read thought of that, but I wasn't sure if it was just because I knew that
nope,
of you or not, but maybe
nope, there's a reason for that.
As an over explainer in my writing, I admire what you did there, and it's interesting to hear about the many drafts this went through, because it's sometimes it really is better to leave things out. And that sort of mystery and surrealism in your story really comes through.
Right. I sent it to my sister at one point, just like say, hey, read this and tell me what you think. And she told me there are places where she didn't think there were enough explanation of what was happening. And so I added 2 or 3 sentences maybe to try to meet those requirements. But yeah, I think part of the reason why I like to write that way is because I'm always afraid that I'm doing too much, that it's going to seem, I don't know, too over the top, or I'm going to put in things that are wrong or don't mesh with the rest of the story. So by cutting things out and paring it back, I always feel a little more confident in what I'm doing or what it comes out as.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
that's interesting because I had the same feeling, but for opposite reasons sometimes. So I feel like, maybe I didn't say enough, and then I end up putting too much in.
Yeah, I think, well, I think in fiction wise, particularly, I lack kind of that confidence that I can carry it off sentence after sentence after sentence. So maybe to a certain extent, it's a reflection of a certain insecurity that I have about the writing itself, to just get it down to the basics and pare it back, and but still try to have emotional impact and let the reader kind of fill things in.
Well, it comes off not like it doesn't come off that way. It comes off very deft and intentional, I would think. And maybe that's my personal um biases, because when I write poetry, it's kind of like that. I really like that aspect of writing poetry. And you said that you've been doing poetry, the fact that you can make it more mysterious and leave things out. And for me, it tends to sound better, because when I'm writing and I'm doing, I do like epic fantasy and stuff like that. When I'm writing everything, it's just so much more stressful.
Well, certain genres just kind of have to have that
Yeah.
more writing. And this story is just, an old guy. And so there's not a whole lot of world building has to be done, not a whole lot of explanation. I imagine almost everybody who picks a book up has, stood near a body of water. So there was a lot of things that, because it is, real world, and it is drawing on probably experiences that almost everybody's had in one, way or another, that I don't have to put all that stuff in, because you just count on readers bringing that experience with them when they get to the story. But yeah, the story, every sentence in the story is intentional, but it's
Yeah.
probably started off as 2 sentences or as a longer sentence or something like that.
That's interesting. Because yeah, just to say for anyone who hasn't read it yet, this one is 1, 2, 3 pages. But it's so intentional. I love it.
Is it the shortest?
It's one of the shortest. I know
Yeah,
that
I haven't read all the way through, so I wasn't sure, and I was a little, anyway. Some of the
yeah,
other stories are so impressive in the world they create and the depth they go to, that I've been a little bit thinking, wow, mine kind of seems like it's really short. But
It's short, but it's big. And we have a few others. PM Brown is like 5 pages, and I think Corey's is on the shorter side as well. But I really like how we have a variety with the length of
yes.
stories, and they all say so much. Paige, did you want to get into that one topic that we were discussing that we highlighted?
Oh, I guess it's not, is it? That was what it Sorry. Yeah, we got to ask, what themes or topics do you typically explore in your YouTube videos, and do they relate to the piece you contributed to the anthology?
I hadn't thought about that. I think that the story kind of reflects a little bit maybe about my reading and what I like to read, not just style, but thematically. Some of my favorite authors right now are, oh shoot, I just forgot her name right out of my head. Claire Keegan, who wrote Small Things Like These, and Foster, which are really short, emotionally intense, I think beautifully written, simple stories. And so I think a lot of what I like to read is reflected in the way perhaps I write more than just the themes, but I do kind of like that, not out front emotion, that kind of like you're reading along and all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, that is, what they're feeling, or that's the emotion here. I like that a lot, whether it's Claire Keegan or William Trevor or, a lot of other writers whose writing I admired, and whose themes oftentimes are things that are sad or about grief or about loss or longing. So sad as all that sounds, what is that? That sounds kind of like a romanticism, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But as sad or perhaps as all that sounds, that's kind of what I probably like to read, and that I think probably reflects on what I write.
Yeah, well, as a writer, you have to read, right? And I find that when I'm reading something in particular, it's going to reflect on my writing. So you should always try to read things that, as a writer, I mean, you can't always read things you like, but it's always best when you can read stuff that you're like, okay, I want to write like this, and it's going to sort of reflect in what I'm doing as well. And it's kind of exciting to have that experience.
Well, like with fantasy or detective fiction or science fiction, I was always afraid that whatever I wrote would be just kind of like a copy of something somebody else had written, and it almost bizarrely feels like by writing about things that are not fantasy worlds, not science fiction, not like detective fiction full of tropes, then that I have this kind of I feel more free, that I'm not just copying somebody else's, even though, like you're saying, everything you write reflects what you've read, what you like, those kind of things. But yeah, I don't think I have the creative capacity to do like epic fantasy or any of those other kind of genres, because I would always just feel like I don't know enough about this, which I think is probably a reflection of the fact that what I mostly write is nonfiction, where I can do the research and find out and know about it. And then feel like, okay, I know enough about this to write about it. Whereas in the fantasy world, I would always be like, oh, I forgot. Somebody needs to be able to fly, or I'm not trying, something like that needs to be able to happen. And I'm just go, well, I'm just, borrowing from somebody else
It
too
it
much.
it is very easy to be derivative when you're writing fantasy.
So
There's just
I
so
admire,
much of it out there.
I admire so much people who can do that and come up with something new and creative, like some of the people's stories that are in the collection. I just think
Mhm.
are really great kind of takeoffs on, maybe not. They seem similar to other stories, but they're all new, and the ones I've read so far are all new, creative, original takes on things. So I've been really impressed by that.
Yeah, I was as well when we were approving these. I was like, this is a really, really great collection. And I actually love it more every time I talk to one of you or look at the stories again. So that's kind of a unique thing, especially as someone who doesn't read a whole lot of anthologies generally. I just really love this one. So on that topic, like how do you feel about being a part of an anthology that features the works of other creators on YouTube?
Well, I'm just thrilled that you published the story first, and then to be a part of it in the anthology with, people who are kind of part of the same community I'm a part of and that I really enjoy enjoy being a part of. Just made it kind of even better. Then, you guys, and I've watched your channels, followed your channels before, and to know kind of about what you guys wanted to do made it even really more special, more cool, more proud to be a part of it, to be honest with you.
Oh, well, thank you. We're glad you're a part of it. When Pay sort of brought you in, I can't remember if it was through like my outreach or through speaking with Pay, but I was really glad that you were going to get involved because I've seen you around in the community. So it's cool to, get to see your work and get to know you a little bit better.
Thanks.
Do you have any anecdotes? Because I know you've been through a lot of drafts with this piece, like anecdotes or memorable experiences related to the process of writing watercolors.
I did not show my wife the story. As you know, if you've read it, you've read it. So it's about a man and a wife. I did not show my wife the story until you published it. So she read it for the first time when I handed her the anthology. I said, look, here's my story, read it. And her first thought was, should I be worried? And so, I let it go. I was like, no, it's not that. And so I let it go. And then just today, I was telling her I was going to be doing the interview. And I said, I just kind of explained to her what I thought the story was about. Not that anybody else has to think what I thought the story was about, but what I thought it was about, to try to make her, feel a little bit more comfortable with the topic and the events that take place in the story. In one of its original forms, I showed it to my mom, who was an English teacher, high school English teacher for a long time. And she wrote back and she said, are you okay? Are you all right? What's happening? So those kind of things kind of made me think, well, at least, the story has some kind of an impact. People are worried about me, or people are, worried about themselves maybe, but at least, it's having some kind of impact. But yeah, other than taking out all the fishing stuff and changing the location and all those are probably the only anecdotes I really have about writing it. And they have more to do with people's reaction to what I wrote than
I like that. Jolene had a similar thing happen with her
Right,
story.
Yeah, I watched her, I read her story, watched your interview with her, and I thought, matter of fact, I think I contacted her and said, well, our stories are kind of a lot alike, or have a lot in common. So yeah.
Yeah, just scaring your loved ones.
Yeah.
Pay, you're nodding like you understand this experience.
Yeah, I thought that was a common response to anyone's writing when they get it. It's just, I've never received any other response. But are you all right?
Are you all right? Yeah. Not, hey, it was good, or hey, I liked it. It's just, are you gonna be okay?
I think that's a good reaction, actually. I get that to my poetry, usually because I just write it when I'm angsty.
When else would you write poetry?
Exactly. I've tried to write it in a non-angsty way, and it's just not the same. I
can't
wound
imagine
up
being happy and upbeat and writing a poem that I thought was worth anything.
See, the problem was I was happy and upbeat, and I was writing a 10-page poem from the point of view of a serial killer, and I think that actually wound up being more concerning in a way.
Yeah, I can see that too. Yeah, absolutely.
But at this point, I think we haven't actually had you give a summary of your story. It's a bit difficult when it's short like this. But how would you summarize it to someone who's interested in reading, given what we've been talking about?
Let's see. I hadn't thought about this question.
Spoiler free.
Yeah. A man dealing with an emotional subject goes to a familiar place, and something unexpected happens.
That's good.
I mean, like you said, it's only like 3 pages, so that's about as little as I think I can say and give you some idea. And I do think it fits the theme of the collection, so you could probably infer something from that as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything here is going to have some sort of dark element to it, of course. Right. It's funny because right before this, Pay and I were saying, well, like it's short, so it's easy to spoil, but it's also hard to spoil because of the way you've written it, which is kind of cool.
Well, and I'm not really a death of the author person, but I do think that anybody can read it, or people can read it and maybe get something different out of it than what I was thinking when I wrote it, because it is not specific about lots of things. It
is more open for interpretation, for sure. How does the act of writing a piece like this for you differ from your process when you're writing other works like your poetry or your less your nonfiction pieces that you put out?
Well, usually like with a short story, which I don't think I'll ever be able to write a novel, but like with a short story, which I enjoy writing, I just have an idea. I have to say, hey, I just write that idea down. More often than not, I put it in the notes section of my phone now. And then I just kind of like one day I'll pick up the phone, I'll have time, say, hey, I want to do this. I'll write the first draft of the story. And then, like I was saying, I usually then just go back and just make it smaller, change it, reduce things, try to simplify it, get rid of things that don't need to be there, add, change I do a lot of verb changing. I do a lot of, trying to create something kind of visual that where there hadn't been a lot of visual before. And so I do stuff like that. With my poetry, I honestly, I write poetry on my phone. You open the notes function, I'll have an idea for something and I'll just write the first draft of the poem on the phone. And then I'll go back and just edit it on the phone over and over and over again. And eventually I'll put it on my computer if I think it's good enough. And then with nonfiction, I have, just areas of interest that come up for various reasons that I do research on fairly extensively to get, generally speaking, I've only written 2 books and each one took me at least 10 years. So there's a lot of research and then writing process and, those kind of things go on. So there really are 3 different things. And of all of them, the stories are the thing I do almost exclusively just because I enjoy doing it without any kind of expectations or even really goals. But that probably is different. When I'm writing a nonfiction, I think, I think this idea could be a book. I might be able to find enough information and turn this into a book, whether self-published or whatever. But with my short stories, I'm more like, hey, I just like doing this, and this is like fun. And if somebody is nice enough to print one, I'm ecstatic. That's great.
That's cool actually, because Pei, you also do work in fiction and nonfiction. So I feel like you guys sort of relate on that level, doing those 2 different elements of writing.
Yeah. Well, well, I'm writing something right now that deals a lot with history. It's not history, but there's a lot of research in history that needs to be done just to get the ideas together. So, and I love doing it. It's my favorite part. So
Yeah, I only write because I research. If I didn't get interested in something and do the research, then I wouldn't be writing those things because a lot of times with nonfiction, to me, it's not really fun. It can be rewarding, but it is just a pain. Right now on the manuscript, I'm trying to fit in new research into the manuscript that I'd already sent out and already had interest in. I'm trying to fit in new research to lengthen the length of the project. And that's just, anyway, I had to reorganize the whole thing and restructure it. And that means I have to put all the endnotes and citations back in and change it. Anyway, you don't want to hear all that. That's a lot of, that's not particularly fun, but the end product is rewarding. Whereas to me, the story is fun, regardless what happens to it.
So how do you, since we've talked about, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and we're dabbling in YouTube too, has your experience on YouTube influenced your writing?
Oh, like we were saying, only the extent it probably has changed my reading a little bit more. Since I talked about reading Hemingway as a young man, that my probably pick up on my early reading was focused on American male, like white male writers. And that's certainly what I read a lot of. And, I didn't read that exclusively, but once I got on BookTube, then I started reading a lot more stuff, a lot more translated fiction, a lot more. I read more fantasy and detective fiction, and I've even read more science fiction than I was reading before. And I think that's kind of maybe influenced me in terms of giving me more things I might want to write stories about, maybe making me feel a little bit more comfortable. Like the next thing I think I want to write is just like a detective short story of some kind or another. Cool. And so, that's just like a fun idea of something that I want to write. So I think in that way, YouTube's influenced my reading, and my reading influenced, kind of what I want to think about writing. I do love watching, by the way, videos about writers talking about their process. I'm not sure, being the age I am, I'm not that open to changing what I have set in stone about the way I go about things. But I love writing process videos where people talk about, all the silly stuff, like what kind of pen you use, what kind of what time of day is it? Do you wait, when do you write? What do you drink coffee? Do you write while you're drinking, like alcohol, that kind of thing? What I like that. And then hearing people's ideas about what works for them and how they break through writer's block. And, some of those things I think I take in and I go, well, I might try that. That might work in this situation. So in that sense, maybe also YouTube has influenced my writing.
That is very, very true. Like it's influenced mine in the same way, just in that it opens your world up a bit more. And it's always cool to see how other people do things. And it's funny because you sort of set out on YouTube being like, I'm going to share something with the world. And then you don't quite, for me anyway, you don't quite expect how much you're going to get back
Right.
in return.
Yeah.
And I mean, even this collection coming to fruition was from joining this, and it can be a frustrating platform, but I think there has been a lot of good, honestly, that's come of it.
Yes. I've always been surprised by how much more I get out of it. I thought it like you, I would be talking and
Yeah.
people would listen to me. But more and more often I find that I'm listening to what, other people I follow have to say and taking that in a bit more than I expected. And that's a community aspect that I really, people tell you, oh yeah, the community's great. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. And then, but it kind of really is. And you find the right group of people, it really kind of is. So.
Yeah, and writing can be such a writing and reading are such solitary tasks that it's interesting to find the right people because you don't always expect that to happen.
Right.
I mean, like Pei and I met through YouTube, so it's very cool just to see the scope. And I just remembered a question I was going to ask you when we were talking about fiction versus nonfiction, and then we'll sort of wind this up.
Okay.
I was wondering if when you're researching for nonfiction, if that ever inspires your fiction and your poetry works.
Probably not the poetry, but the fiction ideas oftentimes they do. I often find that what interests me in terms of nonfiction writing is not anything I'm necessarily always interested in terms of reading. But right now, what I'm writing or finishing up writing the manuscript for is a piece of military fiction. So it has created ideas made for stories about soldiers in certain situations and those kind of. So I have those ideas, and like I said, I put them in my phone or I write them down somewhere, and when I have time. I might go back and try to develop them into stories. But so in that sense, yes, definitely. And I find it, I'm not. Don't tell anybody, but I'm not a huge reader of military history. But everything I write seems to have some connection to the military. I never was in the military. My dad wasn't in the military.
Past life.
No idea.
Past life.
Perhaps, yeah. There you go. I was thinking the very first story I wrote and ever sent off to anybody was a story about a Napoleonic soldier who everybody thought was dead on the battlefield, and they buried him, and he dug his way out. And I thought, well, I've always been writing about the same thing. And then I read a novel by Balzac, which is based on that exact premise. So maybe I'm Balzac.
Yeah. Maybe
That's what I'm going to say from now on. I'm Balzac reincarnated, just not without the talent, but
I think you're plenty talented.
Well, Balzac's one of my favorite writers, so
cool.
Not quite that level.
Not one I've read, unfortunately, but Pei, have you?
Yeah, a while ago. But yeah.
It's kind of an acquired taste, I think.
I've been meaning to go back to
Yeah, I think lots of people pick a 19th century French author, and that's their 19th century French author. And for me, it's Balzac and not Hugo or Zola or I'm forgetting Flaubert. Balzac is mine, so I like his books better than the other guys.
Winding up our interview, Pei, was there anything else you wanted to get into before we give Brian his his platform?
No, I think I said everything I was going to say.
Great. So, Brian, are there any other projects, any creative endeavors that you're currently working on that you'd like to share with the YouTube audience, the Stygian community, and anyone who might be watching this?
Well, the military history book I'm writing will be published by Casemate Publishers in the spring of next year. And it's called MacArthur's Bloody Butchers, which seems to be fit with the Stygian thing. And
I like it.
But it is military history, and so there's that. And then I'm thinking about self-publishing a little chapbook of my poems when I grow the confidence enough to to think I want people to see them. That would probably be about it for right now.
Cool. Well, I would definitely read your poems. I think Pei would as well.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, that's two
So
people.
votes of confidence, and I'm sure you're going to get more in the
Appreciate it.
comments here.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for chatting with us today. It's been great getting to know a bit more about you and your process. And for anyone watching, I'll be putting your links in the description down below so that they can follow your reading journeys and your writing journeys and find out when your publications come out. And with that, we'll talk to you soon. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, well, again, thank you guys for everything, and you really deserve a tremendous amount of success for what you've done. I really appreciate it, and I think you're the exact kind of people who need to be able to succeed and have success with what you're trying to do. I think it's really impressive, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you so much. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, have a great day.
Yep, you too.